The great chamber of the Galactic Concord was larger than any building on Earth. Its walls stretched upward for kilometers, disappearing into a ceiling of floating lights that looked like captured stars. 3,000 species had sent their representatives here. They filled the rising seats that circled the central platform like waves frozen in stone. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood alone on that platform. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm brown eyes. Behind her, a holographic image of Earth rotated slowly. Blue oceans, green lands, white clouds, the only home humanity had ever known. The arbiter floated down from his high seat. His name was Verteth, and he was made entirely of living crystal. Light bent and scattered through his body as he moved. He had judged species for 10,000 years. He had never shown mercy. "The charges have been read," Verteth announced. His voice rang through the chamber like struck glass. "The species known as humanity stands accused of disrupting galactic peace. They are too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous to remain among civilized peoples." Elena listened without expression. She had expected this day for years. Every human leader had. They had joined the Galactic Concord 47 years ago, full of hope and wonder. They had believed they were entering a community of equals. They had been wrong. The alien species had never accepted them. Not really. Humans worked too hard and asked too many questions. They colonized worlds that other species had declared uninhabitable, and they made those worlds bloom. They traded goods at prices that undercut ancient monopolies. They learned technologies in decades that other species had taken centuries to master. And then there was the Krethvari incident. Krethvari War fleet had attacked the human mining colony on the edge of explored space. The Krethvari were ancient and proud. They had conquered 100 worlds. They expected easy victory against the young human species. The miners had no warships. They had mining lasers and cargo vessels and desperate courage. They fought back with everything they had. They turned asteroid fragments into weapons. They crashed their own ships into enemy vessels. When the battle ended, the Krethvari fleet was destroyed. Every single ship gone. The Concord had not celebrated this victory. They had grown afraid. "The vote will now commence," Verteth said. "All member species will cast their decision. Exile beyond the Perseus Veil or continued membership in the Concord." The holographic tally appeared above the chamber. Numbers began to climb on both sides. Elena watched them rise. The votes for exile grew faster and faster. Species she had never spoken to condemned humanity. Species she had called friends turned against her. The final count burned in the air. 2,847 votes for exile. 153 votes against. The chamber erupted in noise. Thousands of alien voices spoke at once. Some cheered. Some laughed. A few sat in silence, their faces troubled. Ambassador Kethra of the Volani, a tall being with silver skin and 4 arms, watched Elena with something like sadness in her ancient eyes. Verteth raised a crystalline hand. Silence fell. "The decision is made. Humanity is hereby exiled from all Concord space. You will remove yourselves beyond the Perseus Veil within 1 standard cycle. Any human found in Concord space after this period will be destroyed. Your worlds will be redistributed among loyal member species. This judgment is final." Elena felt the weight of those words. 1 standard cycle. 6 Earth months. 14 billion people. Hundreds of colonies. Thousands of ships. Everything humanity had built among the stars would be taken away. She was supposed to beg now. That was what the Concord expected. Every species that had faced this judgment before had fallen to their knees and pleaded. Some had offered terrible bargains. Some had threatened war. All had eventually been crushed. Elena did none of these things. She smiled. The expression was small and quiet, but it spread across her face like sunrise. She looked up at the assembled species, at the beings who had judged her people unworthy, and she spoke in a voice that carried to every corner of vast chamber. The human confederacy accepts your terms. Silence. Complete and absolute silence. Verteth's crystal body flickered with confusion. You accept? We do. Elena's smile did not waver. We will be gone within one standard cycle. You have our word. The chamber exploded into chaos. Representatives shouted at each other. Some demanded to know if this was a trick. Others insisted it must be a mistranslation. The Krethvari ambassador, a massive creature covered in armored plates, roared that humanity was planning something. But Elena simply stood there, calm and patient, waiting for the noise to fade. Ambassador Kethra pushed through the crowd to reach the platform. Her silver face was creased with worry. She had traded with humans for decades. She had studied them. She had voted against Exile. Elena, she said quietly, what are you doing? The veil is death. No species has ever returned from beyond it. You are accepting genocide. Elena looked at her old friend. For a moment, her calm mask slipped, and Kethra saw something underneath. Not fear, not despair. Something that looked almost like excitement. We are accepting a challenge, Elena said. There is a difference. She turned back to face Verteth and the watching thousands. We will leave your space. We will cross the veil, and we will make our own way in whatever lies beyond. She paused. But understand this. You are not exiling us because we are weak. You are exiling us because you are afraid of how strong we might become. That fear is wise, but it comes too late. She began to walk toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the stunned silence. One more thing, she said, stopping at the edge of the platform. When we leave, we will take everything that belongs to us. Every ship, every station, every resource we have gathered. You will receive empty worlds and barren moons. Nothing more. Verteth's crystal form blazed with sudden anger. You cannot strip your colonies. Those resources belong to the Concord now. Elena looked back over her shoulder. Her smile was gone. Her eyes were cold. Come and stop us. She walked out of the chamber. The doors closed behind her. And across the galaxy, on 100 human worlds, preparations that had been secretly underway for decades shifted into their final phase. The exile had begun. But it would not end the way the Concord expected. Humanity had been told to leave. They did not intend to go quietly. Director Marcus Chen had not slept in 4 days. He stood in the command center of Olympus Station, high above the rust-colored surface of Mars, and watched the largest movement of people in human history unfold across his screens. 14 billion souls. That was how many humans existed across all their worlds and stations. 14 billion people who needed to be moved beyond the Perseus Veil in 6 months. It was an impossible task. Humanity did it anyway. The secret had been kept for 30 years. Even before they joined the Concord, human leaders had understood a simple truth. They were newcomers in a galaxy that did not welcome newcomers. Someday, they might need to run. So they had prepared. Hidden shipyards orbited distant moons. Massive colony ships were built in the darkness between stars. Generation arcs, each one capable of holding 1 million people in frozen sleep, waited in the shadows like sleeping giants. Supply vessels, factory ships, mining platforms, and countless smaller craft had been constructed and hidden away. Now they emerged. Marcus watched the screens as humanity revealed its true strength. Ship after ship rose from hiding places across human space. The Concorde had estimated the human fleet at perhaps 10,000 vessels. They had been wrong by a factor of 20. "Director Chun," said his assistant, a young woman named Sarah, "the Concorde monitoring stations are going crazy. They are seeing our ships, and they don't understand where they came from." "Let them watch," Marcus said. "Let them see exactly what they have done." On Earth, the evacuation was nearly complete. The great city stood empty. Billions of people had already boarded the transport ships and departed. Those who remained were the workers and engineers, who would finish the final task. They were stripping the planet. It was not revenge, though many in the Concorde would later call it that. It was survival. Survival. Every resource humanity might need in their exile was being collected. Orbital factories were taken apart piece by piece and loaded onto cargo vessels. Space elevators were collapsed and transported. Communication satellites were gathered like falling leaves. On the moon, enormous machines dug deep into the gray rock, extracting rare minerals that had taken decades to mine. On Mars, the terraforming equipment that had begun to turn the red planet green was carefully dismantled. Even the asteroid belt was not spared. Mining ships towed entire rocks toward the gathering fleet. The Concorde species watched in growing horror. They had expected humanity to leave behind functioning worlds, rich colonies, valuable infrastructure. Instead, they were watching humans take everything that was not nailed down, and quite a few things that were. Ambassador Vortek of the Krethvari demanded that the Concorde stop the humans. "They are stealing from us," he roared at an emergency session. "Those resources belong to whoever inherits their worlds." But no one moved to stop them. The truth was simple and embarrassing. No one wanted to fight humanity. Not after what the miners had done to the Krethvari fleet. Not after seeing how many hidden ships humanity had produced. The fear that had driven the exile vote now kept the Concorde frozen in place. On Luna Colony, the last humans prepared to depart. Commander Wei Lin walked through the empty streets one final time. She had been born here. She had raised her children here. Now she would never see it again. "Commander," said one of her officers, "the last transport is ready. We should go." Wei Lin nodded. She took one last look at the domed city where she had spent her life. Then she pressed a button on her communicator. Across Luna Colony, carefully placed charges detonated. Not explosions meant to destroy, but precisely calculated demolitions. Buildings collapsed inward. Domes cracked and fell. The atmosphere rushed out into the vacuum of space. In minutes, the colony was reduced to rubble. If humanity could not have it, no one would. Similar scenes played out across every human world. Colonies were dismantled. Stations were scrapped. Anything that could not be taken was destroyed. The message was clear. Humanity was leaving nothing for those who had cast them out. 3 months into the Exodus, the first-generation ships crossed into the Perseus Veil. Sensors reported strange readings. Energy signatures that made no sense. Gravity behaving in impossible ways. Several ships vanished without trace, pulled into the unknown by forces no one understood. But the others continued forward. There was no turning back. Marcus Chun remained at Olympus Station until the very end. He watched the last civilian ships depart. He watched the military vessels take up position to guard the retreat. He watched Earth itself, blue and beautiful, shrink in the distance. "Director," Sarah said quietly, "Ambassador Vasquez's ship is approaching." "She is the last one." Marcus nodded. Elena Vasquez came aboard looking tired but satisfied. She had spent the last 6 months negotiating, threatening, and buying time for the evacuation. She had done her job perfectly. "It is done," she said. "The Concorde is already fighting over our empty worlds." They found nothing. Not a single ship. Not a single useful machine. Even the soil has been stripped of nutrients. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Good. What did they expect? They told us to leave. They did not say we had to leave anything behind. The last human ships gathered at the edge of the veil. Behind them lay the galaxy that had rejected them. Before them lay the unknown darkness. Death waited there, perhaps. Or something else entirely. Elena stood at the viewport of her ship and recorded one final message. It would broadcast across all Concord frequencies as they departed. "You wanted us gone," she said into the recorder. "You never specified we had to leave anything behind. Remember that when you are picking through the dust of our worlds. Remember what you could have had as partners. Remember what you chose to make into enemies." She paused, then added, "We will not forget. We will not forgive. And someday, when you have forgotten our faces and our names, we will return." The message ended. The broadcast began. And then the human fleet. 200,000 ships carrying the last hope of their species, crossed into the Perseus Veil and vanished from galactic history. The Concord celebrated their departure. They divided the empty human worlds. They told themselves they had made the right choice. They had no idea what they had done. 200 years passed. The galaxy moved on. The Concord continued as it always had, ancient and slow and satisfied with itself. New species rose to prominence. Old species faded into memory. The great machine of galactic civilization turned without pause, and humanity became a story. At first, everyone talked about them. The species that had stripped their worlds bare. The species that had chosen exile over submission. The species that had walked into the death zone called the Perseus Veil and never returned. But as decades passed, the stories changed. They became warnings. Lessons taught to young species about the dangers of growing too fast and making too many enemies. "See what happened to the humans," the teachers would say. "They thought they were special. They thought they could challenge the natural order. And now they are gone. The Volani were the only ones who kept true records." Ambassador Kethra, now very old but still respected, maintained archives about humanity. She wrote books about their history. She gave speeches reminding the Concord of what they had done. No one listened. "You are obsessed with a dead species," her critics said. "Let them go. They are dust now, lost in the veil like everyone else who entered that place." Kethra disagreed. She had known humans. She had traded with them, talked with them, studied them. She understood something that the rest of the Concord did not. Humans did not die easily. The first strange reports came from the edge of the veil. Scout ships sent to monitor the boundary zone stopped returning. At first, the Concord blamed natural hazards. The veil was full of gravitational storms and radiation bursts. Ships disappeared there all the time. But then the probes started sending strange data. Deep in the veil, sensors detected energy signatures that should not exist. Power outputs that exceeded entire stars. Gravitational anomalies that suggested massive structures being built in the darkness. And sometimes, just sometimes, the probes detected signals. Organized patterns. Communications in frequencies no known species used. The scientific community dismissed the readings as instrument errors. The veil corrupted sensors. Everyone knew that. The strange data meant nothing. Then ships started vanishing closer to Concord space. A trade vessel disappeared near the border. Then a patrol squadron. Then an entire monitoring station with 300 crew members. Each time, the last transmissions reported the same thing. A shadow, something huge and dark moving in the distance. And then silence. The Concord finally sent a proper investigation fleet. 20 warships. The best sensors. The most experienced crews. They would enter the edge of the veil and discover what was happening. None of them returned. Kethra addressed the Concord in the same chamber where humanity had been exiled 2 centuries before. She was ancient now. Her silver skin faded to pale gray, but her voice was still strong. "We made a mistake," she said. 200 years ago, we stood in this room and condemned an entire species to death. We were afraid of what they might become, but fear made us stupid. The representatives stirred with annoyance. They did not like being lectured. "Consider what we did," Kethra continued. "We took the most adaptable, most stubborn, most creative species we had ever encountered. We gave them unlimited motivation for survival. We pointed them toward a region full of unknown resources and ancient mysteries. And then we gave them 200 years to grow without any interference from us." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We did not exile a weak species to die in the darkness. We planted a seed in fertile soil and walked away. What do you think has grown there?" The Arbiter Varteth, unchanged after 2 centuries because his kind lived for millennia, spoke with dismissal in his crystal voice. "You speak of ghosts, Ambassador. Humanity is dead. The veil is impassable. These disappearances are simply natural phenomena." "Then explain this." Kethra activated a hologram. It showed the most recent probe data from the veil boundary. Energy readings beyond anything the Concord could produce. Structures that spanned entire star systems. And in the center of it all, a single clear image captured before the probe went dark. A ring of black metal, 5,000 kilometers in diameter, floating in the void. Its surface was covered in lights that pulsed with steady rhythm. Like a heartbeat. Like something waiting. "That appeared 17 hours ago," Kethra said. "At the exact spot where humanity entered the veil 200 years ago. It was not there before. Now it is." The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted over each other. Some demanded military action. Others called for evacuation. A few sat in stunned silence, finally understanding what Kethra had been warning them about for 2 centuries. Verteth called for order. His crystal form blazed with barely contained emotion. "Even if this is human construction," he said, "it changes nothing. They are 1 species. We are 3,000. They cannot threaten us." Kethra looked at the ancient arbiter with something like pity. "You still do not understand them," she said. "When we exiled humanity, they did not cry. They did not beg. They smiled. Elena Vasquez stood where I stand now, and she smiled at us. I have thought about that smile for 200 years. She looked around the chamber at the frightened faces of 1,000 species. Now I understand what it meant. It meant she knew something we did not. It meant we had made a terrible mistake." Kethra turned back to the image of the massive ring. "And I believe we are about to find out exactly how terrible that mistake was." The ring pulsed once, twice, 3 times dot, and then it opened. The ring opened like an eye waking from a long sleep. Every sensor in 3 sectors overloaded at once. Ships lost navigation. Stations went dark. Communication networks collapsed into static. For 17 minutes, the entire region was blind. When sensors returned, they showed something that made no sense. The ship had emerged from the ring. It was barely a kilometer long, small by Concord standards. But it moved differently than any vessel the Concord had ever seen. It did not fly through space. It seemed to fold space around itself, appearing in one location and then another without, crossing the distance between. Its hull was made of something that absorbed light. It was not painted black. It was black. Looking at it was like looking at a hole in reality. The Concord defense fleet scrambled to intercept. 200 warships, the pride of a dozen species, formed a wall between the strange vessel and populated space. Their weapons charged. Their crews prepared for battle. The black ship stopped. It hung motionless in the void, surrounded by enough firepower to crack a small moon. Then it broadcast a message on all frequencies. "This is Captain Yuki Tanaka of the human ascendancy vessel Prometheus. We come in peace. We request permission to dock at Concord Central for diplomatic discussions." The response was immediate panic. Fleet commanders demanded orders. Politicians screamed at each other across vast distances. The Arbiter Von Teth called for immediate destruction of the human ship. But no one would give the order to fire. They had seen how the vessel moved. They had no idea what weapons it carried. And they remembered, despite 2 centuries, what had happened to the Krethvari fleet. Ambassador Kethra took control of the communications. She was the only one who remained calm. The only one who had expected this day. "Captain Tanaka," she transmitted. "This is Ambassador Kethra of the Vorlani. I knew your ancestors. I voted against their exile. You are welcome to dock at Concord Central. You have my personal guarantee of safety." There was a pause. Then a new voice came through the speakers. Female, warm, amused. "Ambassador Kethra, my grandmother spoke of you often. She said you were the only honest being in the entire Concord. Thank you for your welcome. We will be there shortly." The Prometheus folded space again and vanished. Before anyone could react, it reappeared directly above Concord Central, the massive station that served as the heart of galactic government. It had crossed a distance that should have taken days in less than a second. The defense fleet was left behind. Useless and confused. Captain Yuki Tanaka walked through the same halls where Elena Vasquez had accepted exile 200 years before. She was a tall woman with short black hair and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. She wore a simple uniform with no decorations except a small patch on her shoulder. It showed Earth surrounded by stars. Behind her walked 2 guards. They carried no visible weapons, but something about them made even the most aggressive Concord species step aside. The great chamber was full when she entered. Every species that could send a representative had done so. They stared at her with fear, confusion, and hatred. She looked back at them with calm curiosity, like a scientist studying interesting specimens. Verteth floated forward to meet her. His crystal form pulsed with barely controlled anger. "You should not be alive," he said. "The veil kills everything that enters it." Tanaka smiled. It was the same smile Elena Vasquez had worn 2 centuries ago. The same smile that Kethra had never forgotten. "The veil did not kill us," Tanaka said. "It transformed us." She raised her hand and activated a hologram. The image that appeared made the entire chamber gasp. It showed space beyond the veil. But it was not empty darkness. It was full of light. Thousands of worlds orbited engineered stars. Megastructures stretched across entire systems, harvesting energy on scales the Concord could not imagine. Ships moved in fleets so vast they looked like clouds of metal. And everywhere, there were humans. "We found things in the darkness," Tanaka said. "The veil was not a death zone. It was a barrier. A wall built long ago by a species far older than any of you. They left behind their knowledge, their technology, their warnings." She paused. "And their fear." "Fear of what?" Kethra asked. "Of what is coming." Tanaka changed the image. Now it showed something else. Something distant but approaching. A wave of darkness moving between galaxies. Consuming stars. Destroying everything in its path. The ancient species who built the veil did not hide from each other, Tanaka explained. They hid from this. They called it the silence. It is not a natural phenomenon. It is an enemy, and it will reach this galaxy in approximately 300 years. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives screamed denials. Others demanded proof. Some simply sat frozen, unable to process what they were seeing. Verteth's voice cut through the noise. If this is true, why tell us? We exiled you. We condemned you to death. Why would you warn us of anything? Tanaka looked at the ancient arbiter. For a moment, the smile faded from her face. Because we are not like you, she said. You exiled us out of fear. You threw away potential allies because you could not control us. But we are better than that. We do not abandon people to die simply because we dislike them. She looked around the chamber at the assembled species. We are not here to conquer. We are not here for revenge. We have built something beyond the veil, a civilization strong enough to face what is coming. And we are offering you a choice. What choice? Kethra asked. Tanaka's smile returned, but now it was softer. Warmer. Almost kind. Join us. Become part of the human ascendancy. Not as subjects, but as equals. Help us prepare for the silence. Help us build defenses that might save this galaxy. She paused. Or refuse. Stay in your concord. Keep your old hierarchies and your ancient fears. Face the coming darkness alone. She spread her hands. The choice is yours. Something you never gave us. The chamber fell silent. 3,000 species considered their options. And slowly, one by one, they began to understand exactly what their exile vote had cost them. They had created the very thing they feared. And now they needed it to survive. Admiral James Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the Ascendancy flagship, Eternal Dawn. Through the viewport, he could see the galaxy spread out before him like a carpet of lights. Somewhere out there, 3,000 species were deciding the future. He was a large man with dark skin and gray temples. He had been born beyond the veil, part of the first generation raised entirely in exile. He had never seen Earth except in recordings. He had never breathed air that was not recycled through human machines. But he carried the memory of his ancestors in everything he did. Admiral, said his communications officer. Captain Tanaka reports that the Concord is debating her proposal. Initial reactions are mixed. Okonkwo nodded. He had expected resistance. These species had spent 2 centuries telling themselves that humanity was dead. Accepting that they were not only alive, but stronger was difficult. Accepting that they needed human help was nearly impossible. Give them time, he said. They will come around. He turned and walked to the tactical display. It showed the full strength of the human ascendancy. 6 million warships. 12,000 colony worlds. Construction platforms that could build new vessels faster than the Concorde could count them. And behind all of it, technologies that made Concorde science look primitive. But it was not enough. OKO and KWO had seen the projections. The silence was coming. It had consumed galaxies before. It would consume this one too, unless something stopped it. Humanity alone could slow it down. Humanity with the full resources of the Concorde might actually win. That was why they had returned. Not for revenge. Not for conquest. But for survival. His second in command, a woman named Chen Wei, joined him at the display. She was a descendant of the same Director Chun who had coordinated the Exodus 2 centuries ago. Do you think they will accept? She asked. Some will, Okonkwo said. The Volani certainly. A few others who remember what we were like. But many will refuse. They are too proud. Too afraid. And what do we do with those who refuse? Okonkwo was silent for a long moment. It was a question the Ascendancy leadership had debated for years. Some wanted to force compliance. Others wanted to abandon the Concorde entirely and let them face the silence alone. Both options felt wrong. We protect them anyway, he finally said. Even if they refuse. Even if they hate us. We save them because that is who we are. Chen Wei raised an eyebrow. That seems inefficient. It is. Okonkwo turned to look at her. But our ancestors chose exile rather than becoming what the Concord feared. We will not conquer. We will not enslave. We will offer help and hope that eventually, even the most stubborn species will accept it. The debate in the Concord chamber lasted 3 days. Species that had barely spoken to each other in centuries now argued about the future. The Krethvari demanded war. They had not forgotten their defeat at human hands, and they refused to accept help from their old enemies. The Volani pleaded for acceptance. Others stood somewhere in between, torn between pride and fear. Captain Tanaka waited patiently. She answered questions. She provided evidence. She showed recording after recording of the silence consuming distant galaxies. And slowly, opinion began to shift. On the 3rd day, Ambassador Kethra rose to speak. She was the oldest being in the chamber now. She had witnessed the original exile. She had kept faith with humanity when everyone else had forgotten them. I have lived for 400 years, she said. I have seen species rise and fall. I have watched empires grow and crumble. But I have never seen anything like humanity. She turned to face the assembled representatives. We exiled them because we were afraid. We sent them into darkness hoping they would die. And what did they do? They survived. They grew stronger. They built wonders we cannot understand. And now, when they have every reason to destroy us, they offer peace. Her voice grew stronger. This is not the behavior of a species we should fear. This is the behavior of a species we should be grateful to have as allies. I have watched humanity for 250 years. They are aggressive, yes. Unpredictable, yes. Dangerous, absolutely. But they are also loyal, creative, and impossibly stubborn. Those are exactly the qualities we will need to survive what is coming. She raised her hand. I vote to accept the human ascendancy's offer. I vote to join them as equals in the fight against the silence. And I call on every species here to do the same. The voting began. One by one, species cast their decisions. The numbers climbed on both sides. It was closer than the exile vote had been. Much closer. But as hours passed, a clear winner emerged. Final count. 2,912 votes to accept. 88 votes to refuse. The same chamber that had condemned humanity now voted to join them. The irony was not lost on anyone. Captain Tanaka accepted the result with grace. She shook hands with Kethra. She nodded politely to Verteth, who could not meet her eyes. And then she returned to the Prometheus to report to her superiors. A week later, Admiral Okonkwo addressed the combined fleets of humanity and the Concord. His message was broadcast across both civilizations. Today begins a new chapter in galactic history, he said. For 200 years, humanity built in isolation. We grew strong because we had no other choice. But strength alone will not defeat what is coming. We need unity. We need cooperation. We need the full might of every species in this galaxy working together. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. Some of you still do not trust us. You remember the exile. You remember your fear. That is understandable. Trust takes time. But I promise you this, humanity did not return to rule over you. We returned because the galaxy is our home too, and we will not let it be destroyed. The broadcast ended. Across 1,000 worlds, beings of every species watched the human fleets begin to move. They were heading for the borders of known space, where construction of the first defense platforms would begin. Captain Tanaka stood at the viewport of the Prometheus. Watching the galaxy she had been born too late to remember. Her first officer, a man named Sato, joined her. Think they will ever really trust us? He asked. Tanaka watched a human dreadnought drift past. Its hull was covered in symbols from 100 colony worlds. Each symbol represented a people who had survived exile and emerged stronger. Each one was a reminder of what humanity had endured. "No," she said, "but that is fine. We learned a long time ago that we do not need their trust. We do not need their permission. We do not need their approval." She turned from the viewport. The lights of the Concorde blazed behind her, but her eyes were focused on the darkness ahead. The darkness where the silence waited. The darkness that humanity would face with or without allies. "We just need them to stay out of our way while we save them." The Prometheus turned toward the veil, toward home, toward the place where humanity had been reborn. Behind it, a galaxy struggled to understand what had happened. Before it, an enemy older than stars prepared for war, and in the space between, humanity did what it had always done. They survived. They adapted. They grew stronger, and they waited for whatever came next.